Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is actually a double entry. It's part of our Marketing Masterclass series, which we've been producing now for over the past year, but it also forms part 3 of our sustainability webinar series. It's titled Sustainable Marketing, and as it says on the tin, it's exactly what we're going to be discussing with you today. Just a bit of housekeeping rules before we crack on. The attendees' microphones are muted. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask those, but we'll record those and we'll follow them up after the session. Because of the amount of attendees we typically get, it's difficult for us to reply to these during the live sessions, and it can sometimes interrupt what the guests are doing. So by all means, send those through and we will respond to you afterwards. If anybody wants to know more about what MBS do, or if you've got any curiosity regarding the things that you've seen today, please feel free to visit thembs.com or drop us a note at info@thembs.com. So your speakers today is myself. I'm Lee Jones. I'm the head of manufacturer solutions at MBS, but I'm also involved with a lot of different aspects within the business, from the specification side, the tools there, right through to marketing, sales, development. And for some of my sins, I'm actually a qualified architectural technologist that specialized in sustainable architecture. So contributing to the sustainability series is something that I've been absolutely pleased to be part of, but also something that I'm quite passionate about. Joining me today in today's session is Cecilia Parker-Rana. Cecilia is the project director from the Competition and Markets Authority. Now, the CMA themselves have recently launched a green claims guide that's actually very new as we speak. So Cecilia is joining us later in the session to actually talk through what the CMA have been doing and what businesses need to do to make sure that they're compliant, and obviously not doing anything wrong in respect to sustainable marketing. So we'll hear more from Cecilia later. But for now, I'm just going to introduce who MBS are. So MBS are part of the Big Factor Group. We are a group of technology platforms that operate globally. In the UK, the entities that you'll be more than familiar with, I'm guessing, are MBS, which is who I work for, but also our sister company, Glenigan, and we provide the opportunity for the construction sector to connect throughout the design and construction processes. From an MBS directly specific point of view, we've been connecting the specification community and the manufacturers for 50 years. We were formed originally by the Royal Institute of British Architects back in 1973. And today, our cloud-based solutions are the go-to platforms for specification writing, predominantly in the UK, but also in various sectors and regions around the world. As well as those specification tools, we also provide a means through MBS Source to actually connect construction products manufacturers, product systems, materials into those specifications. So our customers are your customers, and all the connected stakeholders are involved throughout those platforms as well. Just a bit about what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to start off with a bit of scene setting, so why sustainability matters. Talk a little bit about general sustainability and how that differs from carbon reduction, because there seems to be a little bit of, obviously, confusion and overlapping within that. So just to clarify what that is. We'll talk about the marketable aspects that a business can do when it comes to sustainability. And the benefits that that can bring. But we'll also talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls and things that you need to avoid. And obviously that will lead us quite nicely into what the Competition and Markets Authority have to say, and then I'll hand you over to Cecilia. Once we've heard from the CMA, I'll then show you a little bit of how MBS can help and what our platforms are doing to actually make these requirements easier for manufacturers in particular to convey information, but for also the specifiers to actually receive this and make better sound judgment. So setting the scene. Sustainability versus climate change. What's the big difference? I thought it'd be easy just to drop in the Oxford Dictionary definition. So sustainability is defined as the avoidance of depletion of natural resources in order to maintain an ecological balance. So climate change does form part of this, but climate change is something different, where sustainability might be reducing plastic waste, for example. Climate change is actually focusing on the Earth's weather and the changes in temperature, wind patterns, that kind of thing that can cause natural disasters, but are obviously impacted from heating up the planet. Today, this has been really, really sort of increased at a rapid way by carbon dioxide. It's burning fossil fuels ultimately by the human race that's actually causing this. So from a sustainability point of view as a business, there's quite a lot to consider. So if you're looking at carbon reduction, net zero, that kind of thing, the climate change bit is really the part that affects that. But from a sustainability marketing perspective, there's a whole broader picture in the whole sustainability piece as well. So sustainability, things people typically might talk about. Plastic is obviously an absolute large area where people are focusing. We see a lot of people trying to reduce packaging now. We obviously had the carrier bag tariff introduced in supermarkets in the UK. There's also things like water consumption. So obviously in a world where people are moving more to city areas or urban areas, that water is depleting. There's less to go around, and obviously conserving this, particularly in an area where we're actually seeing the temperature rise and obviously the concatenating effects that go with there. It's becoming more precious. So products might be manufactured as being produced using less water, or it could be something that's like a piece of sanitary ware that might be having a lower flow rate or something like that. So there's a whole host of different things rebounding that. Timber, any products that use timber materials, systems, looking for things like chain of custody and FSC and making sure that it's from a renewable source or sustainable source even is high on the agenda. Paper, looking at going more digital is a great thing to note. Obviously, MBS, we started back in 73 with these paper binders, and today everything's cloud-based. We're completely paperless. So yeah, what we need to do to tackle that and obviously reduce the amount of trees that are being used to generate that paper, which obviously leads into the carbon thing. And then ethical sourcing, so where products are sourced, who is actually maybe farming original materials or mining, that kind of thing, making sure that businesses are operating in the most ethical manner also forms part of the sustainability side of things. If you want to learn a little bit more about this, I'd highly recommend having a look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals. 13 points there actually go through these very concisely. But from a specification point of view, the RIBA 2030 climate strategy also covers this quite widely. With climate change itself, sort of four things that I think are probably the most important that we need to consider as a sector. The first thing is greenhouse gases, the 7 of these main types. Carbon dioxide is the big one, and as a sector in the construction industry, this is really the big emitter from our point of view. Methane's also quite high, but tends to be around things like farming and agriculture. But for the majority of people that live and work and drive cars, eat their homes, cook, or work in factories that produce materials or are building projects out on site, carbon dioxide is the main one, and it's the big contributor to increasing the temperature of the planet. On that note, in 2019, as a globe, we generated 36.4 billion tons of CO2. So that is absolutely massive, and it's far higher than where levels were in 1990. So looking at that net zero race, most places are trying to reduce their emissions below what they were at 1990 levels, and then look at offsetting as a last resort from that point forward. So we've got quite a long way to go. It's something like a 60% increase, if I recall. If anybody wants to know a bit more about this, the first webinar of this series I actually conducted on how to become a sustainable business covers this quite in depth, and it's available at the mbs.com on the events page on demand if you want to see that retrospectively. Out of all that CO2 then, the built environment shockingly is responsible for 40% of all of that. So as professionals, we need to do more, and a lot of this is sitting on our heads to actually improve the state of the planet and making sure that it's there and it's sustained for future generations. To drive that home a little bit more of how sort of important that is, out of all of that CO2, the Earth can only absorb half of what we're emitting at the moment. So yeah, we're in a bad place, and we're only going to keep heating and heating till it gets to the point where places become inhabitable, and we see a lot more natural disasters. We're seeing things like the wildfires affecting areas of population in the States. Germany had some really drastic flooding earlier this year. So this isn't just things that happen in far reach corners of the earth that don't affect us. It's starting to impact everybody on a global scale, and we need to do something about it. So that said, with all of that, there's been a lot of sort of pathways being made, and we're going to obviously hear from the CMA later about what's happening with respect to marketing. But just wanted to highlight a few key reading points if you wanted to take a look at these. The Climate Change Act of 2008 was in the UK probably the sort of the main push that started the ball rolling for what we're doing here. There's the RIBA 2030 climate strategy, where the RIBA are actually calling upon their members to design more sustainably. So this links into a lot of the developments that MBS have been doing in respect to Chorus and MBS Source, and making sure that what the specification community are doing and ultimately what's built is as sustainable as possible. The IPCC report came out earlier this year as well, and you would have seen this. It was all over the news, and there is fear that we're already past the turning point. So this sort of need to is now absolutely imperative. We must actually do some changes. And then obviously leading in from that, we've got COP26 that's just around the corner. It's in a few weeks' time. It's been held in Glasgow this year, and I'm expecting some real sort of legislation changes to come out of that. If we don't, it's going to be extremely disappointing. But yeah, let's see what happens. We need to make a change, and this is a place where the global leaders can actually meet and enforce that. So let's talk about some positive sustainable goals. Obviously, this is a marketing masterclass. That's a bit of a background, but how does this impact marketing? Well, as a business, there's a lot of things that you can do. So you might be looking at reducing your operational emissions. If you're not, I'd really highly recommend this. So lowering your CO2, lowering your carbon footprint, can be quite complex depending on the scale of your business. It could be quite easy. MBS have done this. The webinar that I mentioned earlier, the first one of the series, is how to become a sustainable business. It gives a bit of a how-to guide and a case study. Feel free to take a look at that, or visit the mbs.com. And on the About Us section, we've actually got our sustainability page, which talks about what we've been doing there, which will give you some helpful hints and tips. But effectively, lowering your emissions is only going to stand you in good stead. It's obviously going to help that improvement of the planet, but it also gives a lot more potential there for marketing. It also helps to save costs. So through identifying hotspots where you're generating emissions, once you've actually measured these things, you could look to reduce assets that you have, but also by default, look at reduce your energy consumption. So by default, this helps lower costs, but provides you with a really clear benefit to market to your consumers about what you're doing. There's then the products themselves or services. So you could be a manufacturer that makes a material or a system. You could be a specifier that's actually offering a service to clients. If you can think outside the box and be innovative, being seen as a thought leader really, really can help. So that's something that you can shout about. And obviously anything that you do there at the moment, sustainability, and for the foreseeable future is going to be at the top of everybody's minds. Being seen to make a change, whether it's how your products are made or how it's your products perform, whether it's the service that you offer, looking at some of your portfolio as to the sustainable credentials that you've done as a business, or what your ethos is of your outlook on design, whether you're a specifier or whether you're a designer, or whether you are a manufacturer that's producing products. There's a lot that you can do with your offering to your clients. Ultimately, that then is going to improve the client's footprint. So that's only going to benefit them, and it's going to make them happy, and it's going to make them want to do that business. And ultimately, it makes you more attractive as a prospect. Some businesses might see this as a bit of a sticking point. Anything that can be slightly out of the ordinary can be a bit daunting, and people will put things off. An industry such as the construction one is very slow to adopt change. Something we've heard about before in a lot of the summits that we've held. Industry is slow to adopt changes. If you compare us to other sectors, we really don't move very fast, and by default, some people can look at things and think, well, that's additional process that we've got to do. We don't have the time for that, or we don't have the budget to apply resources. It really is a benefit, and this change is obviously a chance for you to do something different and actually grow your business. Doing that then can help you increase your marketing activity, so it can help boost your brand image, as well as having that satisfaction of knowing that you're doing something positive as well. It'll allow you to get further reach. So there might be prospects out there that you might not have done business with before, but are looking for those specific environmental credentials in whatever it is that they're taking from you, whether that's a service or a product. You'll find that you'll be able to reach newer customers as a result. And then improve target. So if you've got specific things that you can do, you can obviously target your marketing activity towards that as well. With that said, there's obviously a lot of benefits that you can do, and most of those would have been obvious. But the thing that maybe isn't quite so obvious is how you can make claims. Now, we're going to hear from the CMA, and I'm pretty certain Cecilia is going to talk about greenwashing within the presentation. But it's something that I wanted to highlight, and it's a big problem with marketing at the moment, particularly with sustainability being such a important factor. People are always trying to cash in on that and look for leverage to get their products in front of people and obviously selected. So again, going back to these definitions, greenwashing, it's the disinformation disseminated by an organization so as to present an environmentally responsible public image. Now, that might be a correct process if they are environmental, but if they're not as green as they may be saying they are, then it's obviously going to be misleading to the consumer. And this is what greenwashing possibly could be. So as a business, the things that you need to be mindful of is generic claims. If you're marketing sustainable information using terms like environmentally friendly, it doesn't help anybody. How is it environmentally friendly? Without backing up information as to what a product's doing or what a service is doing or why it's achieving the claims that you're making, doesn't help anybody. And particularly when it comes to specification, if a product is claimed to be environmentally friendly, the specifier can't make any judgments from that. It doesn't help anybody at all. So make sure that the claims that you make are statistical, that they're backed up, and also that they're very, very clear. Don't use anything that's irrelevant. I mean, I've seen this in the past, and there's a great example that I came across on the web the other day where a manufacturer was marketing a product as CFC free. Now, CFCs were actually banned in the 1990s. So, of course, any product that's on the market will have to be CFC free. If it isn't, it's not going to market. So, yeah, make sure that any claims that you're making are relevant and don't just add something on for the sake of it, because people will obviously catch on with this and they know what they're doing. Packaging, you could have a sustainable product. You might have something that's made of completely 100% recycled material. If it's an energy consuming product, it might be the lowest energy consumer product that's in the market. But if you're then wrapping that up in polystyrene and then sticking it in a plastic box and shipping it out from one country to another 3,000 miles away, it's obviously losing its sustainable benefit then. So just be very careful on the marketing side of things and consider the whole sort of net product as a whole, and not just the product itself. Graphics, obviously, in the marketing sector, imagery is everything. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes people add more on to get the imagination going. Now, there's been a lot of use of the color green and using things like cardboard type sort of backgrounds and things on different packaging, on advertisements, on websites, that kind of thing. This can be deemed as misleading the consumer if a product is not 100% as green as you're making it out to be, or even less than that. So make sure that what you're doing is honest and truthful. And obviously the CMA are going to be talking a little bit about how that's being combated through their new venture in a moment. Don't use ambiguous percentages. I mean, something might say 30% more recycled content, and 30% more than what? Is it more than it used to be, or is it more than the competitors? What recycled content is it? Is it post-consumer, pre-consumer? There's a lot that needs to be factored in, so just be very, very mindful of doing that. And I think last but not least, don't use a lack of substance. If you are making claims, have the sort of ensurety that you can back that up. So third-party certification is obviously something that's been really, really pushed. as a sector, as well as sustainability. Safety is obviously at the forefront, particularly fire safety and third-party accreditation that's been developed through the Building a Safer Future report, and the whole Code for Construction Product Information and everything that's being pushed there is high on the agenda, and sustainability is no different. If you're making claims, just make sure that that's substantiated. Just to give you a little bit of information as to why this is being discussed and what we're talking about. On the government website, there's been some recent analysis done, and what they found is that roughly 40% of green claims made online could be misleading. So you might be guilty of this now. You might not be marketing anything sustainable, but there's obviously a lot of information out there, a lot of advertisements out there, a lot of products out there that could be already being misled, and it might be that the people just don't realize that that's what they're doing, but obviously the guidance is there. Hopefully this webinar is going to help, and obviously the things that the CMA are doing are going to set out some guidance and some assessment tools for you to look at that. So apply some caution. Just got a couple of examples here before I move over and pass on to the CMA. Sorry, this is everybody's favorite brand of tomato sauce. I know it's mine, but yeah, it's one of many. The plant bottle. On the bottle itself, guess what my bottle's made of? And then in the little advertisement, it says up to 30% of this packaging is made from plants. Is that up to 1%? Is it the whole 30%? What is the rest of the product made from? Is that recyclable? We don't know. So even the sort of the big players in the industry can potentially be misleading without realizing. We just need to be very careful. Another example is where people might use data, and it's data driven, and even that could still not be accurate. So this is something I'm more than aware of. I drive a plug-in hybrid vehicle, and Which did a review on these quite recently. And what they found that was plug-in hybrid cars actually use way more fuel than the figures claim. My particular vehicle claims it's got a CO2 equivalent of 40 kilograms per kilometre. But obviously that in the test lab conditions is factoring in it being in a hybrid mode for a lot of the time. Now, being a plug-in hybrid, the battery is really small, and in electric, it generally has about 16 miles of range. So if I'm driving from where I live to our offices in Newcastle, 200-mile journey, the majority of that's going to be just running on the petrol engine. So in reality, those emissions are probably going to be more likely 140 kilograms. So yeah, the stats might be real, but make sure that you're really thinking about everything, because the consumer's only going to be upset, and you want that repeat business. You want to build that brand trust and brand loyalty. So make sure that you're substantiating everything, and that even if you're getting the science behind it, that the science is correct as well. So joining me now is Cecilia Parker-Arana from the Competition and Markets Authority, who's going to be talking a little bit more about the environmental claims and what the CMA has been doing in respect to that of recent times. So Cecilia, thank you very much for joining us. And if you'd like to run through your presentation, it'd be really, really good to hear what you've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lee. As Lee said, my name is Cecilia Parker-Arana. I'm a Director of Consumer Protection at the Competition and Markets Authority, and I'm currently heading up our work on environmental claims. I'm going to take you through the CMA's work on environmental claims. I'll explain a bit of background to that work and what we've done so far. I'll also introduce you to the 6 principles that we've created to help businesses comply with consumer protection law, and I'll tell you a bit about our plans for the future as well. I'm also going to touch briefly on 2 other areas which might be of interest to you. That's information we've produced on sustainability agreements, and a commission that we've received from the Secretary of State to provide advice on how consumer protection and competition law can support sustainability goals. Before I dive into our work on environmental claims, I want to just explain a little bit about the CMA, who we are and what we do, for those of you that might be less familiar with us. We are the leading authority for enforcement of competition and consumer protection law in the UK. We take action against businesses who are not complying with their legal obligations, who are treating other businesses or consumers unfairly, or who are engaging in cartel activity. We also try to drive compliance through softer activities like awareness campaigns. We're responsible for overseeing mergers in the United Kingdom, ensuring that mergers don't lead to a substantial lessening of competition. We also run market studies and investigations looking at markets to ensure that they're working properly from a competition perspective and that they're delivering consumer benefits. But from my perspective, our most important work is in the field of consumer protection, and it's under this umbrella that we launched our work on environmental claims back in November 2020. So for the first time in 2020, the CMA made an annual plan commitment to support the transition to a low carbon economy using the powers at our disposal. And one of the first problem areas we identified was greenwashing. In other words, businesses making misleading environmental claims. So environmental claims are claims which suggest that a product, service, process, brand or business is good or at least better for the environment. It includes claims that suggest or create the impression that a business, product or service has a positive environmental impact or no environmental impact, is less damaging to the environment than a previous version of the same product or service, or is less damaging to the environment than competing goods or services. So we'll just move on and I'll say a little bit on misleading environmental claims. So misleading environmental claims happen if a business makes claims or leaves out or hides information to give the impression that it or its product or services are less harmful or more beneficial to the environment than they really are. In September this year, following a consultation process, the CMA published new guidance on making environmental claims on goods and services. Now, our aims in publishing this guidance were to make sure that those who are getting things wrong put them right, to create a level playing field for those businesses that are genuinely green or that are genuinely working on improving their environmental impact. And of course, we wanted to protect consumers who are trying to choose products and services which are environmentally friendly. The guidance is built around 6 principles, and we've got them on the next slide for you. So first of all, claims have to be truthful and accurate. For your customers to make informed choices about what they buy, environmental claims have to be truthful and accurate. They must not mislead people by giving them an inaccurate impression, even if those claims are factually correct. And they must only give consumers the impression that a product, service, process, brand or business is as green and sustainable as it really is. So for example, a business shouldn't claim or give the impression that a product is recyclable if it is not, or if only parts of the product are recyclable and others are not. The next principle is that claims should be worded in a way which is transparent and straightforward so your customers can easily understand them. So the claims have to be clear and unambiguous. They should not be presented in ways that are liable to confuse consumers or give the impression that, again, that a product or service is better for the environment than it is. Now, I know not every business has the capacity to carry out consumer research, but I would say if you do have that ability, it's great to test your consumers' understanding of the claims that you want to make. Find out how your customers would really interpret the claims that you're planning. The next principle is that claims must not omit or hide important relevant information. So what claims don't say can also influence the decision of consumers. Claims made by businesses which omit or hide information can occur where they focus, for example, on saying one thing but not another, or where they say nothing at all about a particular issue. And it's vital that businesses pay close attention to the information on environmental impacts that consumers might need to make an informed decision. So take, for example, a business making a claim about net zero or carbon neutrality targets. Many consumers don't understand these terms, so it's important that the claims are as clear as possible. You as a business should be clear about what you're doing and how you are doing it. You should include accurate information about whether and to what degree you are actively reducing your carbon emissions in the creation of your products or carrying out your services, and the extent to which you're offsetting emissions by carbon removal schemes. In particular, where you're offsetting, businesses should provide information about any scheme that you're using. If not, consumers can easily be misled into thinking that products or processes are generating no or few emissions, and when that's unlikely to be the case. The next principle is about comparative environmental claims, and these have to be fair and meaningful. It's important that consumers are not misled by the way comparative claims are made. And this is really linked to the principle that claims have to be truthful and accurate. Comparisons need to be made on a clear, up-to-date and objective basis. They shouldn't benefit one product or service or brand to the detriment of another if the comparison is inaccurate or false. So for example, a business might make a claim that its clothing range is now greener. But if the business doesn't say what it's greener than or why it's greener, the claim is unlikely to be acceptable from a consumer protection law perspective. If a business says all our clothes contain 50% more recycled fibres than before, then that is likely to be more acceptable because it's more precise and helpful to the consumer. Our fifth principle is about the full life cycle of the product or service. So when you're considering whether a claim could be misleading, the full life cycle of a product or service and the whole of a business's activities may be relevant. Now, this doesn't mean that a business always has to provide a full life cycle assessment, but you will need to consider the life cycle of a product or service before making any claims. Claims can be based on a specific part of an advertised product's life cycle or part of a business's activities, and then you need to make clear which aspect you are referring to. But if you're making a claim about a specific aspect of your environmental impact and you're ignoring some other important aspect of the life cycle, you might still be giving consumers the impression that you're greener than you actually are. Our final principle is about substantiation. So most environmental claims are likely to be objective or factual claims that can be tested against scientific or other evidence. And businesses need to have evidence to support them. And that's what we mean by substantiation. I would recommend that you start with the evidence first. Once you know what evidence you have of the impact you make on the environment or the impact that you don't make, it's much easier to decide what green claims you can legitimately make. And of course, one of the things that you can do is consider third-party accreditation. Becoming accredited on your environmental performance by appropriate independent certification schemes can help you to make sure that you are basing any claims that you're making on specific evidence. You should, of course, look for a scheme which offers accreditation for meeting strict objective standards, because not all schemes are created equal. I want to touch briefly on another aspect of our guidance, which is about business-to-business transactions. So although the main focus of our guidance is on consumer protection, we've also made clear that the same principles should be applied when you're making claims to other businesses. And we've done this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we don't want businesses who are trying to prove their own environmental impact to be harmed by misleading environmental claims. And secondly, very often misleading information can be passed down the supply chains and can ultimately prevent consumers from making informed decisions. As I've already mentioned, we published this guidance in September. It's important to note that the guidance doesn't introduce any new legal requirements. Instead, it is aimed at showing businesses how existing consumer protection law applies in relation to making green claims. Over the next few months, we're working on raising awareness at events like this to encourage businesses to take a look at their existing practices and change them if needs be. And during this time, I would really encourage you to consider any environmental claims that you're making, to read our guidance and make sure that you're complying with your consumer protection law obligations. You can review your marketing material and any sales information that you are giving to your customers or prospective customers. Check that you've got the evidence to back up any claims that you're making and that the evidence is robust and up to date. And of course, you can get legal advice if you're unsure about what you need to do. Now, in the new year, we plan to kick off a compliance review where we'll look at whether businesses are complying with consumer protection law. We're still working on the plans for that, but it's likely that we'll begin with sectors where we see the biggest problems. That compliance review may very well lead to enforcement action against businesses who we think aren't complying with consumer protection law. Now, if we take enforcement action, we typically begin by trying to get undertakings from a business. So we ask a business to commit to complying with consumer protection law and to provide specific information about how they're going to do that. Sometimes we'll seek redress for consumers who've been harmed as a result of any greenwashing. For businesses who won't change, it can end up in court, which of course can be a costly process and will almost certainly cause reputational damage. Now, before I finish, I mentioned a couple of other areas of work I wanted to highlight, which might be of interest to you. And so one of the ways in which businesses are striving to meet climate change targets and other environmental goals is by working with other businesses to do things like reducing their carbon footprint or improving the environmental standards of their products. It's important that competition law doesn't become an unnecessary obstacle to sustainable development, and that businesses aren't deterred from taking part in environmental initiatives for fear of breach of competition law. And of course, as a competition authority, we also want to make sure that markets remain competitive and open to innovation. Now, to help businesses think about making sustainability agreements, we published information back in January 2021, where we outline the current framework for self-assessment of competition law risk, and we set out the key points that businesses and trade associations will want to consider when they're signing up to any sustainability agreements. Then in July this year, we received a commission from the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. He's asked us for advice on how current competition and consumer legal frameworks constrain or frustrate initiatives that might support the UK's net zero and sustainability goals, what changes might need to be made to the legal framework to help achieve those goals, and what other opportunities there are within competition and consumer policy to support the transition to net zero. We launched a call for inputs last month to get ideas from consumers, businesses and other stakeholders. This is to help us develop our advice. And so you have until the 10th of November to respond to that call for inputs. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to say. I hope you've found it interesting and useful. I've prepared some links for you to read about the various bits of work that the CMA is doing. You'll find links to our guidance and to the different policy initiatives that I've also mentioned. And I hope all of this information is going to help you and your business do your bit for the planet and for consumers.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Really, really informative and yeah, fascinating. I think there's a lot that the listeners are going to learn from that. And can I just thank you on behalf of MBS and everybody listening for giving us the time today to talk through this. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me, Lee.
No problem. So we've heard a lot of what sustainable marketing can do, the things we need to avoid, and then obviously absolutely fantastic insights from the CMA as to what is available to you now to help you with your marketing, particularly around sustainability and the things that you need to avoid. So what has MBS been doing to align to this, and how can we help? Well, first, we've always had a clear focus on honest and accurate data. In this particular video, we've got an example showing MBS Chorus, the specification tool, and we're looking at specifying some timber flooring. We can specify things like the third-party certification. In this case, it's FSC certificate that we might be wanting the information to manufacturer to provide. And then once we then go down to specify the products, through the actual source link that goes into this, we can actually search for these products and we can look for those credentials, and we can actually apply those to the specification. Now, the only way this is possible is having that accurate data, and importantly, having it structured. So anybody that's considering marketing these materials, these products, this information, or looking at using that information, obviously using that digitally and having it machine readable obviously allows that to be done in a lot more efficient manner. And we can see there that we've got that product, the dark oak flooring, specified along with the FSC certification attached to that. Making information clear and unambiguous is something that there's a big focus on. The CMA are now doing this with sustainability. The CPA have been doing it with the Code for Construction Product Information, and MBS are obviously been pushing to facilitate this through all the listings. And you can see there that it doesn't matter what the product is, there's a template for that, and it's all structured irrespective of who the manufacturer of those products are. Things like the U values are there. Now, you might have an example where a product might be marketed as having a 0.9 U value there. But in reality, there might be different variants, and how we can surface that information, as you've just seen, is that the variants actually have the relevant credentials listed. So it's completely clear, and the specifier can make a sound judgment on that decision. Being able to give a fair comparison, obviously having those products structured with their data to the relevant templates, whether this is the MBS clauses or the general information, environmental properties. What we can see here is we've added 3 similar products to the comparison tool with an MBS source, and we can quite easily look at the information and make that judgment from there. So manufacturers, this makes the specifier's job a lot easier to do. And specifiers, if you're looking for that information, then obviously this is really what we're doing, and we're pushing the manufacturers to get this sorted for you to make your life a lot easier and obviously improve the environment that we are building. Then lastly, life cycle consideration. There's obviously a lot more to MBS than this, but if we look at this particular example, we can go down through the specification information. We can see the variations there within the product, but right down at the end, we're actually asking manufacturers now for a lot more environmental properties than we might have done in the past. In this particular case, it's the recyclability of this banister. It's 100% recyclable. It's made of solid aluminium, but also the things like the country of product of manufacture. In this particular case, it's the UK. So sourcing locally obviously helps, improves environmental credentials on designs, whether it's things like embodied carbon, red list materials. We're asking for all of this information, and it's helping to improve specs and obviously improve the end result build. Just going to wrap up and close and let everybody get on with the day. So key takeaways from this session. For myself, I think obviously one is sustainability is at the forefront of decision making now, whether it's the built environment that we're operating in, whether it's you as a consumer in your personal life. Sustainability is absolutely paramount, and you've only got to go to social media, watch the news, go to the supermarket. Everywhere it's in your face, and it's for a good reason. We need to do more. Businesses obviously then need to up the game in respect to their operations. So it's not just about your products or your service, it's also about you conduct yourself. So aiming for net zero, looking to reduce your carbon emissions, that whole sort of premise around doing what you do but doing it more ethically and doing it more environmentally friendly is absolutely paramount. And then obviously the products themselves need to follow suit too. This then brings on the opportunities for marketing. So market your positive changes. It can be an absolute benefit to your business, and it might be something that you may not have considered before. It might be something that you're already doing. But if you are doing that, be very, very mindful of how you're going about doing it. Highly recommend taking a look at the CMA's website, and particularly the calculator that they've got to help you assess those things. And if you want a quick reminder of what that is, it's the green claims code. So Cecilia kindly gave us some links on the last slide, but ensuring that your claims meet this is obviously going to help you and obviously avoid any issues further down the line. But ultimately, it's going to make your customers' life a lot easier and make it easier to specify your products. Lastly, we're actually running part 4 of the sustainability series next week, which is on delivering a sustainable water cycle. If that's something of interest to yourselves, please visit the mbs.com on the events page and register for free. This is part 3 of the series. We've just recently, in the past week, ran the sustainable outcomes for the construction industry, where my colleague Paul was looking at specification and how different tools and products and materials can actually help with sustainable outcomes on projects. And then I ran the first session, which is how to become a sustainable business. So if you're looking at lowering your operational emissions, curious about offsetting carbon, that kind of thing, highly recommend that. It's under an hour and it gives a lot of tips and tricks as to how you can do that. If anybody's interested in knowing more about what MBS do or the services that we offer, please feel free to visit us. The mbs.com, you can navigate through either of those, but specifiers, obviously, feel free to take a look there. Manufacturers, if you want the quick route to get into the specific pages for yourselves, visit manufacturers.thembs.com or navigate through directly from the mbs.com landing page. The contact numbers and email addresses are there for you to see. And with that, please have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.